You will hear a number of recordings. After each recording, you will have to answer questions based on what you hear. Before you listen, you have time to read the instructions and questions. All recordings will be played once only. The test consists of 4 sections. At the end of the test, you will have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Section 1. You will hear a man calling a community centre to ask about free events during a local festival. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Good morning. I'm calling because I heard there will be some free activities during the Riverside Community Festival next week, and I'd like a bit more information.
Certainly. The festival runs for several days. Which date are you interested in?
I'll be in town from the 11th, but the day we're free is the 13th. My sister and her son will be with me.
Perfect. There's quite a lot happening that day. Let me start with one of the most popular events for families. The Heritage Hall is hosting an activity morning called Discover History.
Oh, that sounds nice. What time does it begin?
The hall opens at 9, but the event itself starts at 9:30 and continues until 1 p.m. Throughout the morning, children can explore small exhibitions and take part in simple craft workshops.
And is there any kind of demonstration?
Yes, at several times during the day, they'll show a short video explaining how traditional wooden toys were made in the past. Last year the theme was weaving, but this time the focus is on woodworking.
Interesting. What else is available that day?
There are also a number of free musical performances. A few take place in the morning, but most are around lunchtime, and just a couple are scheduled in the evening. They cover a variety of styles, including folk, acoustic pop, and even a short African drumming session.
Oh, the drumming might be fun. When is that?
It's held more than once. The first session is at 12:30 in the community library, the second at 3 p.m. in the town museum, and then they'll do a longer version at 7 p.m. in the outdoor theatre.
Great. My nephew will love that. Is there anything happening outdoors?
Yes, there's a small cycling parade along the riverside path.
Really? Where does it begin?
The riders start at Northfield Park, then head south until they reach Meadow Corner. The best place to watch is from Greenbridge Point, although it can get rather crowded.
And who takes part in the parade?
Mostly local cycling groups, but they're very enthusiastic. One of the youth teams actually won a regional award earlier this year, which was a first for our town.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
I've also heard about the Willow Garden Reserve. Is it worth visiting?
Absolutely. It's a great place for spotting rare insects during the festival. They're especially active at this time of year.
Oh, my sister will enjoy that. Anything else special right now?
Yes, the reserve is known for having unusual types of grasses that only grow in that soil. They look especially striking in early summer.
Interesting. Are there any talks or activities there?
There will be a short presentation about herbs, followed by a guided walk where visitors can see and identify different kinds growing naturally along the path.
That sounds lovely. And is it safe for children to play near the water?
Yes, part of the pond area has been sectioned off so children can paddle safely. It's very shallow, and a staff member is always present during opening hours. People aren't allowed to swim in the deeper lake, though.
Good to know. I'll talk to my family and decide what we want to do. Thank you very much for your help.
You're welcome. Enjoy the festival.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Section 2. You will hear a talk given by a woman named Claire Havers, who works for the Riverton Community Council, about recent developments in the coastal town of Riverton. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining this public meeting about future plans for our community. Our first speaker today is Claire Havers, who will give us an overview of changes in Riverton over the last few decades. Claire.
Thank you. I'll start by giving a short summary of how Riverton has developed in the past 50 years, and then I'll be asking for your feedback on some proposals. As many of you know, Riverton is very different from the small fishing town it used to be. Let me begin with public transport. Half a century ago, buses connected almost every neighbourhood, and people relied on them for daily travel. But today, the transport companies only operate the routes that bring in the highest passenger numbers, meaning several outlying areas no longer have bus services. Even though many buses have been replaced with modern, energy-efficient models, this hasn't encouraged more people to use them. Some residents argue that ticket prices are too high, but compared to average incomes, the fares haven't increased dramatically. Another major change concerns the road system. Recently, the council temporarily restricted traffic in the town square to create a pedestrian-friendly zone. So far, this trial has been viewed positively. The introduction of separate cycling lanes on most main roads has also made a noticeable difference. They are used far more than expected, easing congestion and improving the air quality. And while the council has repeatedly pushed for a bypass to divert heavy vehicles away from the centre, the national government has not yet approved the funding. Shopping habits have also evolved. Older residents may remember when the centre of Riverton was packed with shoppers. Over the years, however, these numbers have dropped, despite efforts such as building new parking areas. Many people now choose to shop in the large retail parks outside the town, where well-known chain stores are located, leaving the centre dominated by small independent shops. Turning to healthcare, Riverton used to have more small clinics, but today fewer practices serve a much larger population. Our local hospital was closed nearly 2 decades ago, so residents must travel to nearby cities for major treatments. On the positive side, the number of dental practices has actually increased. Employment patterns have also shifted. The town now has a larger number of schools and training centres, making education the biggest employer. Professional services like digital marketing and financial consulting have also grown, while local manufacturing has remained surprisingly steady despite national declines elsewhere.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
All right, I'd like to outline the current plans for several important facilities in Riverton. First, the station car park. Many of you know that it is almost always full. The railway company proposed constructing a multi-storey car park, but planning permission was denied. Instead, they have purchased a plot of land next to the current site, which will allow the car park to be expanded to create more spaces. Next, the old Seaview Cinema on Fisherman's Road. It will close at the end of the year and will move to a new location near the marina. A new building with 3 smaller screening rooms is already under construction. Regarding the indoor market, its condition has been deteriorating and safety concerns have been raised. Although there was discussion of closing it permanently, the council has decided to keep it. It will close temporarily so it can be repaired and refurbished and is expected to reopen in the summer. Now, the public library. Many students rely on it for study space, and demand has increased significantly. Fortunately, new funding has been secured, which means the library will soon extend its opening hours on certain evenings. There is also long-term interest in expanding the building, but that plan is not yet confirmed. Finally, the nature reserve on the south coast. Access will stay completely open to the public, but management will change. Instead of being overseen by Riverton Council, responsibility will be transferred to a national conservation organisation, which manages several other reserves across the country. That concludes my update. Now I'd like to hear your thoughts on these developments.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Section 3. In this section, you will hear 2 students called Sarah and Michael, who are studying media production, discussing a project for their course. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
Hi, Michael. Glad you made it.
Hey, Sarah. Sorry, the studio door was locked, so I had to wait for someone to open it.
Anyway, we should check our progress on the children's podcast project.
Right. I listened to the updated audio files you recorded for my story, The Moon Garden. The voices are really nice and soft, exactly the mood I imagined.
Good to hear, but I still want your opinion on a few parts.
Sure, go ahead.
The recording of the lake scene sounds clear, but it feels a bit empty. I think there should be some background sound.
True, it's too quiet. Maybe we could add the character Lila walking toward the water.
Yes, Lila should be included. And what about adding an owl calling from a tree?
An owl. Nice idea. It could stop hooting the moment it notices Lila passing.
Exactly. I'll try layering that in.
Then there's the scene with the villagers celebrating near the hill. It's lively, but perhaps we could adjust something.
You originally wanted fireworks in the background, but I thought it might distract younger listeners.
Fair enough. Can we add Lila there too? Maybe sitting on a bench?
Yes, that works.
And could she be sniffling? She's feeling left out at that moment.
Sure, that contrast will help the next scene where she starts laughing again.
Now, about the part where the children are sliding on the meadow.
I'm not totally satisfied either. It's supposed to sound like they're sliding on frozen grass, right?
Yes, but at the moment it just sounds like normal footsteps.
I'll redo that. Maybe I can add longer whooshing sounds.
And the hats you mentioned earlier were great. Can you add a scarf rustling sound for each child?
That's simple. I'll make it suggest they're moving really fast.
Perfect. That should improve the whole sequence.
Now you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
So, Sarah, the next thing is planning the written report that accompanies the podcast.
Right, we need to decide what to include and who writes what.
Should we have a section explaining how we organise the project overall?
Yes, that's important. Why don't you draft that part first, and then we can edit it together?
Okay, that's fine.
And what about describing how we came up with our ideas for the 2 episodes?
I've already started writing a paragraph on that. Maybe you can write your own version too. Then we combine both.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Do we need a section discussing the meaning of the stories, like what children can learn from them?
Actually, no. The tutor said the whole class would read each other's scripts later and share interpretations there, not in the report.
Oh, I didn't know. So we can skip that part entirely.
Yes.
But we must write something about the sound design since it's essential for young listeners.
True, but writing descriptions of sound effects is hard for me.
Then I'll handle that section.
Great, that settles it.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers to section 3. Section 4. You will hear a lecture given to environmental studies students about the management of wildlife living in modern cities. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
So today, I'd like to talk to you about a rather unusual aspect of environmental science, urban wildlife management. We often think of cities as places designed almost entirely for humans, yet many species have gradually adapted to life among buildings, traffic, and artificial lights. As urban development continues to expand, understanding how these species behave has become increasingly important for city planners and conservation groups. Now, what does this have to do with environmental decision-making? Well, studies of city wildlife can give experts clearer insight into how animals respond to pollution, artificial noise, or the presence of humans. These findings help officials predict potential conflicts, such as animals entering housing areas, damaging property, or interfering with transport systems. But beyond preventing problems, this type of research also helps organisations design supportive habitats within cities, like green roofs, safe nesting sites, and wildlife corridors, features that allow both people and animals to coexist more safely. Let me give you a few examples of how urban wildlife studies have influenced planning decisions. One research team followed the movement of raccoons living in a North American city. They discovered that many animals struggled to open traditional waste containers, leading them to scatter rubbish across streets while searching for food. As a result, a new type of sealed bin was created, and it significantly reduced waste on the streets. Another research project was carried out in Asia, where teams observed how urban monkeys interacted with street vendors. It was noted that the animals often learned which stalls left food unattended, causing frequent disturbances. Based on this, the local authority introduced simple training workshops for vendors on food storage, and the number of incidents dropped noticeably. In Europe, researchers installed cameras and tracking devices to learn how foxes navigated city traffic. They realised that foxes repeatedly used the same unsafe crossing points at night. This led to the construction of several small tunnels under busy roads, which helped reduce accidents involving wildlife. Occasionally, studies must be conducted even when researchers cannot follow animals directly. A team working with an urban aviation agency used sound recording devices placed around airport boundaries to analyse bird activity during flights. The goal was to understand how noise and lights affected birds' flight patterns. The data helped engineers adjust runway lighting systems to reduce the risk of bird strikes. So, what separates urban wildlife management studies from more traditional ecological research? First of all, researchers do not always begin with a clear hypothesis. Instead, they may start with a very open question such as, how does this species behave in a crowded city environment? And allow the animal's actions to guide the direction of the study. As for selecting research sites, the locations might be chosen according to factors like the density of buildings, the level of nighttime noise, or simply the areas where residents most frequently report animal sightings. However, choosing suitable sites is crucial. They must be safe, accessible and representative of typical urban conditions. Otherwise, the conclusions won't be particularly useful. Another characteristic of this research is that it usually involves long-term observation rather than short surveys. Researchers may spend weeks or months tracking the same group of animals to identify stable patterns rather than temporary or unusual behaviours. Interviews can also be carried out, but they tend to be directed by residents rather than researchers. For example, citizens might be asked to describe when and where they see animals, and their stories often reveal trends that scientists wouldn't notice from data alone. Yet, after all these observations and conversations are complete, the most time-consuming part of the study begins: analysing the material. Researchers say that as much as 70 to 80% of their effort goes into reviewing video footage, organising field notes, and comparing tracking records. They don't focus on rare events. Instead, they try to identify consistent behaviour patterns that reveal how animals adapt to the artificial environment of a city. These insights can influence how buildings are designed, how parks are maintained, and how transport systems operate, ultimately helping people and wildlife live more harmoniously.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers. That is the end of the listening test. In the IELTS test, you would now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet.